You talk a lot about meditation. I want to dive deeper into that if we can. And anybody, if you're watching this right now thinking, oh, they're talking about meditation, I'm going to check out, just bear with us for a second because this is something that is truly near and dear to my heart. And it really comes about from, and I think you can allude to this too, Jeff, is meditation isn't a woo-woo practice. It isn't for, monks that are sitting on a hill somewhere that just sit all day and meditate. From my perspective, just to tell a quick story, we've got fathers that are faced with chaos all day long. And it may not be massive chaos. As I've talked to you, I was a firefighter, a paramedic, and a captain with the Aurora Fire for about 10 years. I joined the fire service though when I was 17 years old. Little small volunteer fire department in Genesee, Colorado, just west of the foothills of the mountains. And the first call that I went on, it was a snowy afternoon. And one of the crashes that had happened on I-70 ended up getting a lot worse because the tow truck coming to tow the cars away lost control and actually plowed through the scene. So there were a number of individuals that were very hurt, including a couple firefighters. So we were responding over there to help out. And the people on scene were very agitated. Their cadence of their voice was very high and fast. Their voice inflection was very high. And everybody around them felt that energy and that anxiety, and they all raised their cadence as well. So as soon as we showed up on scene, there was no command presence. There was no calm. There was no poise. It was everybody for themselves, just trying to get through the incident. And that to me was a very profound experience to be a part of because I'm thinking, well, is this how people manage emergencies? People that are supposed to be doing this for a living? Fast forward 1 month, Jeff, and we're in a structure fire. It's a chimney fire inside of a home, and there's snow everywhere, and we just can't get this thing under control. We're trying our best to hit it from the outside as the fire's blowing out. And I'm sitting here thinking, just like that other officer on the car crash, we got to get out of here. We're just going to have to let this thing burn down because we can't handle it. My anxiety, my inflection, everything's going up. But then I had our fire chief come in and he stood right next to me, calm, composed, confident, and gave me instructions on exactly what we needed to do and how we needed to manage this incident to bring it under control. So the dichotomy of those two incidents, Jeff, has forever stuck with me. And then as I moved into professional firefighting and EMS, I wanted to see what techniques, what tools are available to be able to manage stress when somebody is under cardiac arrest, when the entire family is watching over you while you're trying to do compressions and manage this emergency. There's got to be something out there that can help to calm the mind. Dove super deep into this whole process and have found that meditation, mindfulness, presence, these type of things can help to lower your blood pressure, lower your anxiety, and allow you to focus on the present moment to be able to manage these emergencies in a calm, cohesive way. So I only bring that story up, Jeff, to kind of articulate that you may not be a firefighter, you may not be a paramedic, but you deal with technology or with chaos in the home in your own way, whether it's your kid that falls and bumps their head, or whether it's just kids in the morning trying to get out the door and everybody's screaming, how to manage the stress around your life and know when your mind is going away and faltering and not focused on the present moment, and then being able to bring it back to that. So, long setup, long preface, Jeff, for you to say, what is meditation? Why is it something that's beneficial in light of the story that at least I just told? And how is it something that you believe we all should be really partaking in?
A lot of times I think people have a narrow view of what meditation is. I break down meditation into kind of five paths that you can follow. There is more of the athletic path, and if you look at professional sports these days, there's all kinds of athletes practicing the meditative arts to help improve their performance. It's
Right.
great for being more present, being more focused, keeping that mind body awareness, understanding concepts like yielding, all of these things that help them perform at a higher level. Then there's the therapeutic side of the practice, which is good for our health and longevity. There's the medical side of the practice, which all of Chinese medicine is based off of Qigong theory, which has been around for 4,000 years. Then there's the philosophical side of the practice, which is something that I've always been passionate about. And the reason why I'm so drawn to it is that I love that it opens up your peripheral vision and helps you see things from multiple different angles to be more strategic, to be more settled and present when things happen. And then there's also the spiritual side of the practice, which people study for the majority of their life, reaching that ultimate goal of enlightenment. And so any one of those meditative paths, you can incorporate things from movement practices, still practices, from breath work, from philosophical concepts, and build an evolving life practice with the meditative arts. And there's so many benefits that come from the practice. I mentioned earlier, I've heard hundreds of stories through the years about how it's helped people with their health and getting through illnesses and dealing with stress disorders and just so many different things. And so it really is, if you're somebody thinking about the practice, if you put the time in, it'll be one of the best things you've ever done for yourself.
So break it down for me, kind of brass tacks. What is meditation, and how do you kind of start with the process of just embarking on it? Do you need an app? Do you need to, buy a meditation bench?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that because I think a lot of people these days are uncertain of what meditation is, and so they'll go out and they'll watch some YouTube channels or they'll get an app and while I think that could be a piece of your education, and there are some good things out there to pull from. In fact, even we at the Yielding Warrior here have an online program that teaches the people how to build an evolving life practice. So one of the things that I find most difficult and challenging as a teacher for over 30 years is getting people to get into the practice enough to where they start seeing the benefits so they make it a way of life. And, I've tried many things through the years to try to get people to see this because I know that if I can connect with them and if I can get them to that point where they start looking at this as something they get to do and get excited about it rather than a chore that they have to do every day, their whole life can change from this practice. So I've come up with 3 things that I like people to spend a little bit of time and consideration with when they're thinking about starting this practice. And I find that if they really put some heartfelt thought into this, that they'll be a lot more likely to be successful with the practice. And the first one is understanding what's the purpose of you wanting to do the practice? What's your why? Why do you want to, what do you want to get out of this training? And once you figure that out, maybe it's you want to stay healthy into your later years to watch your grandkids grow up, or maybe you're dealing with a stress disorder and you need something to help manage that, or maybe you're an athlete looking to improve your performance. Whatever that is, and then once you have that, take it a little bit deeper and think about if you accomplish that goal, what are all the things in your life that are going to change because you reach that level of awareness? Maybe it is your relationships or your work or just your interpersonal communication, whatever that is for you. And then flip the coin and think of 10 or 20 negative things that will happen if you don't accomplish that goal. And the reason why this is important is because we all need that boost or that little bit of fuel that helps us on those times where we don't feel like doing the practice. But when we realize that there's a reason why we're doing this and a motivation behind it, it helps us get through those kind of downturns. And then the next thing, which is extremely important, is understanding the importance of consistency. And with any meditation practice, you have to be diligent and do this on a regular basis. There's this story that I really enjoy about this old stonecutter in ancient China, and he's very well known all across the land, and he creates these beautiful sculptures of animals and landscapes. And when people see his work, they know it's his because it's just something special about it, a little bit different than everybody else's. And because he's so well known, he has people from all over come to study with him, and they'll live with him for a few years at a time to learn the trade. Well, every morning, this stonecutter starts his day off down at the river doing a meditation. And one day after his meditation, he's walking along the river and he has this profound vision of this big, 6 foot tall, mystical Chinese jade dragon. And he's so taken by this image that he decides this is going to be his next project. Now, he travels all around the area looking for this perfect rock. A few months, finally he found the stone that he wants to use. He brought it back to his place, and he spent a number of days just looking at the stone and trying to feel the energy from the stone and seeing how this dragon is going to appear. Well, after a few days, he decides he's going to start and begin his work. He carefully places his chisel on the backside of the rock and starts tapping away with his hammer. Hundreds, if not thousands of times a day, he's still tapping on the chisel, and nothing was changing. A few days go by, nothing changed. A few more days went by, and a couple of his apprentices started thinking, man, maybe he should try something else. Is this going to work? And a few more days went by, and finally he tapped the stone, and this big 3 foot section comes off the backside of the rock, and it created this smooth, slightly curved line that was soon to be part of the dragon's back. And one of his apprentices said, how did you know that that strike was going to break the stone? And the stonecutter said, it wasn't that strike that broke the stone, it was the thousands of strikes before it that broke the stone. And with a bit of a discouraged look on his face, the apprentice said, but I've been watching you and nothing was changing, not even a crack. Why did you keep doing the same thing? Why didn't you try something else? And the stonecutter got down on one knee and he carefully ran his hand along the smooth line that he just created. And he said, each strike was not wasted. The stone was changing beneath the surface. And even though we couldn't see it with the naked eye, through that constant repetition and effort, not only was the stone changing, but so was the one who wields the hammer. And the reason why I like this story so much is because it's closely related to the meditative arts, in that we're practicing these breathing strategies and these movement practices, these philosophical concepts that we don't always see the changes day to day, but through our consistent effort and repetition, it gives us the foundation to reap these fruits for the rest of our life. So understanding that consistency with your practice and going into the practice knowing that, I think, is really beneficial. And then the third and final thing that I like people to spend a little bit of time thinking about is you have to have a guide. Now, it doesn't mean you need somebody in your town, but you have to have somebody that, whether it's a program that you're in or some kind of a system, to help you build a practice and create an evolving life practice. Because, I've mentioned already on YouTube, there's millions of videos out there. And if you think that you're going to be self-taught in a practice that's this deep and this profound, you're never going to get past the surface. And I've, been running this academy for 30 years. I've had students come in here that have been self-taught and they've been training for 15 years. And they'll come in and they'll see somebody who's only been around 6 months that's further along in their practice because they've had somebody to help guide them down the path. And so finding your why and putting some heartfelt thought into it, understanding the idea of consistency and having somebody in your corner to help point you down the right direction, you're a lot more likely to be successful with the practice.
Yeah, the distractions that we face throughout the day are profound, right? We have social media, we have our phones, YouTube, X, all these things are always flashing in front of us. And our mind can just kind of be that monkey mind, right? Where it's going from one thing to the next. Even if you're just trying to focus on something like our conversation directly right here, it's so easy for our mind to start wandering and going to someplace else. So when you talk about that story in particular, it really is, unique and interesting appreciation of you need to take those subtle, consistent strokes to be able to build that up in your mind. I mean, I always think of meditation, Jeff, as being a workout for your mind, right? So if you can train and build the muscle in your mind to acknowledge when you are thinking about something or your mind is starting to wander, acknowledge that and then bring yourself back to you and I talking right now. And then when it goes this way, bring it back to what we're talking about right now. So from that perspective, that seems kind of like the essence of what meditation is based on what you're talking about with those components, correct?
Yeah, I definitely think that's one of the pillars in the practice. Yeah, with any meditation practice, I have what we call, excuse me, I have what we call the five regulations. And these are five underlying principles that work in any kind of meditation, whether you're doing a sitting practice, a standing meditation, whether you're doing something like Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga, it doesn't matter. These are the core fundamental principles that everybody needs to cultivate. And they are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And briefly, I'll kind of talk about what I mean when I say these things. So, regulating the body, excuse me, regulating the body is where we usually begin. It's the easiest thing to see change with our practice. And so, what I mean by this is think about a time maybe when you're sitting down in front of your computer and your shoulders are rounded forward, you've been there for 3 or 4 hours, you're feeling lethargic, maybe your neck's getting sore. And think about another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you feel like you're on top of the world. Well, these two different energetic states we're in 100% control of all day, every day. And so this one idea of learning how to regulate our skeletal alignment and our muscular tension in the body can play a huge role in how we monitor our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. On a little bit of a deeper level with regulating the body, it involves maintaining some kind of muscular development, maintaining some kind of flexibility, eating a healthy diet so we keep our energy up, getting an appropriate amount of sleep. Now, when we move into the breath regulation, this is a very deep topic, and oftentimes Qigong is referred to as the science of the breath because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies that we can use with our practice. Now, because of this, we kind of broadly categorize these practices into yin methods and yang methods. And yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of meditations. And an example of a yin breath that we do all day, every day, is if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so if you want to emulate this inward style of energetic expression in your meditations, we can do longer inhales, soft retentions at the end of the inhale, and shorter exhales to help bring that energy inward. And this is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, dealing with panic attacks. It's great for boosting your creativity. There's lots of reasons why we would focus on this yin side of the breath. Then we have the yang side of the breath, and this is more aggressive. And an example of this would be if you ever had to push your car, or you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is to exhale and put tension in the breath, make it audible. And this helps expand that energy and bring it outwards. Now, when we start understanding how to use the breath strategically, we can use it to control our physical, mental, and emotional well-being throughout the day. The third regulation is regulating the mind. Regulating the mind is a very important part of meditation. And oftentimes I'll hear people say, I tried meditation, but it just didn't work for me. I couldn't quiet my mind. Somewhere along the way, people got this misguided idea that in order to be successful with meditation, you have to reach this state of nirvana where nothing bothers you. And it couldn't be further from the truth. So the idea behind meditation is that Whether you're doing a sitting practice or a standing meditation or a movement practice, if you're sitting there for 20 minutes and you get distracted 50 times, you recognize the imbalance, you use your breath, your posture, your movement to help bring you back to center. You just got 50 repetitions of being off center and coming back to balance. And if you do that all every day, every month, every year, you start to develop this power and this ability that under any stressful environment, or anytime somebody says something to throw you off your game, you're able to come back to that centered position and approach it with less emotions. And so it's very valuable in anything we do in life, just this one idea. There's this story that I enjoy about these two old monks, and they're walking down this dirt road after a huge rainstorm. They come up to this big mud puddle, and on the other side of the puddle is this beautiful little girl, and she's standing there in a white dress, but she's crying. And the older monk, he hollers across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So he rolls up his pant legs, he walks across the puddle, picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side and sets her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, and finally the younger monk is just furious, and he says, "You know we're not supposed to touch girls, but you did back there at the puddle." And he says, "I left that girl back at the puddle. Why are you still carrying her?" And how many times in life do we got to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we realize we need to let that stuff go? And so regulating the mind is a very important part of this practice. The fourth regulation is regulating the energy. And this is an extremely deep topic and something that we could chat about for hours. However, the basic idea of it is once we've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, we now have the tools to regulate the energy in the body and run it through circulations or lead it inward or extend it outward. And we'll use this to get different outcomes in our meditation practice. And then finally, the fifth regulation is regulating the spirit. And this is a very profound idea and something that people will spend their entire life's journey with their meditation practice focusing on this element of the training. But as you can see, by having these underlying principles in your practice, the meditative arts can affect everything we do in life.
So we've got someone watching right now that thinks, all right, I want to give this a try. I've got 10 minutes before I move on to my next thing after watching you and I talk today. Can you give him some basic advice of how to just give a 10-minute shot at meditation? What are the steps? What are some of the things that he needs to do in order to meditate for 10 minutes?
There's lots of directions we can take that. And usually what I like to find with somebody when they're being drawn to the practice is what their interests are, why they're being drawn to the practice, so we can pick different modalities of meditation and understand what practices might be best. But if you're looking for just a simple, generic kind of method that you could do that would be beneficial to anybody, is just find yourself in a comfortable sitting or standing posture and count out 50 breaths. Just sit there and just work a deep, full belly breath. Try to be present. When you're doing this, think about opening up your gaze so you're expanding your peripheral vision so you're not looking at any one point. And oftentimes we'll slightly stare off into space like you're looking 300 yards away, but not looking at any one point. So your gaze is just empty. And then the same thing with the sounds. So you want to focus on all the sounds around you and be aware of them and notice where they are, but not pay attention to any one of them. So you're just kind of being settled. So those few things can help you with an extended practice, like you said, for 10 minutes there. But you could also do something like this with what I call an active practice, which are extremely beneficial in any meditation journey. Is we have ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practice. The ritual practice could be your 10-minute session, your half-hour session, or hour session, whatever that is for you, where you're just turning off all electronics and you're turning your focus inward. Active practices are things that we can do when we're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store. And they can be as simple as counting out 10 breaths or doing some spinal rotations or maybe a simple movement meditation. And when you do this, the great thing about this is it allows you to start being in that place of awareness, in that present state all day, every day. Because even if you have a disciplined meditation practice and you feel at peace for 20 minutes a day or a half an hour a day or whatever that is for you, but then the rest of the day you're stressed out and distracted, it doesn't really make any sense. And so we're trying to integrate these active practices along with our ritual practices to help start living the lifestyle and making it a way that we live our life rather than a hobby that we're doing once in a while.
What's the difference between meditation and mindfulness, Jeff?
I think they're often taught together, and that's how I teach them, in that with meditation, when you're talking about still meditation, breath work, movement meditation, there's different modalities through the meditative practice. Mindfulness is more being present in your activities and what you're doing through, you could be washing the dishes and just be mindful and present rather than thinking about all of the other things you got to do while you're washing the dishes. Just be really present and mindful in that moment. And so I think that when you start to integrate a meditation practice into your life, you start to just naturally become more mindful in everything you do, because you start to be more aware of that present moment. You start to be more in tune with your physiology, with your mental thoughts, with your emotions, and you start to recognize these things. And when you do that, that's where really kind of all the gold of the practice is at, because it helps you just stay more connected to who you are and in that present moment. So when you interact with people or you interact with yourself, that you can do that through a place of being centered and not being so emotionally distracted.
Yeah, you always think of if you get cut off in traffic while you're driving on the road, it's kind of amazing if you pay attention to what's happening to your body in that moment. Your ears start to get hot, your chest starts to buzz. You feel this visceral feeling of, both anger and frustration. And those are all the catecholamines and things that are dumping into your system. So, having had the chance to meditate beforehand, you will acknowledge and notice those things happening. And then, from your perspective, just like you said, mindfulness, being aware of that present feeling, allowing it to pass and course through your system and get out of your system, you will react in a more coherent manner rather than just screaming and cussing and doing all those things. So, yeah, it seems like they both meld together just perfectly, huh?
Yeah, and if you think about, maybe you walk in and you see somebody and they immediately start kind of coming down on you and they're saying maybe some rude things or whatever it is. If you approach that situation and you're already stressed out because somebody cut you off and it got you distracted and you're thinking about everything you have to do, and then that happens, it's a lot harder to stay centered and focused. But if you can integrate these practices and start living this lifestyle, and you walk into that situation very settled and very centered and not distracted, and that happens, it's a lot easier to steer that situation to a positive outcome rather than escalating it.